So as we settle in, I'd like you to kind of take in the people in this room, the people who've chosen to be part of this conversation, this listening and speaking together. Feel the presence of those who are sitting beside you, and just consider their wonderful strengths and talents and what they do, can, and will bring to the world. So I'm Mark Lappin. I'm a laboratory professor here at Middlebury College. I think most of you, if not all of you, know me. So I have the honor of introducing this day a bit. And as I was considering this, I was thinking about how most of my adult life has really been thinking about wholeness and trying to understand Earth as a whole, first in an ecological way. What are ecosystems, and what's the wholeness of an ecosystem, and how do I understand that as a whole? And now I speak more of socio-ecological systems, that term, and really the intertwined human and more than human nature that makes up all of this life that we're part of. And a big part of what this course and these conversations are about is a wholeness and a coming back to the ground of being and understanding that, and ways of knowing, different ways of considering this. I call it, right now, I just call it radical interdependence. And considering what is that? Radical at the root, right? Etymologically, the root. And a big reason we're here is because of roots. The roots of the perennial prairie, the native prairie, and the Land Institute in Kansas, and about 40 some other research institutions working on and breeding grain, legume, oilseed crops so that we could grow food for people with deep roots, with intertwined, tangled roots, rather than disturbing the soil yearly, that whole body of the earth. And we believe that new ways of growing food in perennial polyculture will lead to new ways of being in relation to food, healing, teaching and learning, arts, and coming together in faith communities and how we express faith and converse about all these things. So that's what we're here to do today, of course, right? So as I begin, we are here together, I'd like to acknowledge the lands, the waters, and the air in and upon which we're living right at this very moment. So this place, as we know, has for thousands of years been homeland of Abenaki peoples, and to honor their caretaking and their reverence, which I think really helped these lands remain resilient. One of the wonderful things about our region is the resilience, ecological resilience, and a lot of human resilience as well. And there's a lot of change. We live in a productive, diverse, creative place. I'm going to read an excerpt of a short poem excerpt from Joseph Bruchac, probably the most well-known Abenaki author. And rather than my words and someone else's words to think about this land, I thought it might be appropriate for some of his words. Endakina is what the Abenaki call the homeland, the place. You cannot understand our land with maps, lines drawn as if earth were an animal's carcass, cut into pieces, skinned, divided, devoured. See this land instead with the wind eagle's eyes, how the rivers and streams link like sinew through a leather garment, sewed strong to hold our people, patterns of flowers close to the brown soil. Do not try to know this land by roads, hard lines ripped through old stones. Here's where I'm skipping a bit. Instead, let your feet caress this soil in the way of the deer whose feet follow and form trails through the ways of least resistance. Knowing ridges and springs, ways of wind through the seasons, the taste of green twig and tender grass, the sweet scent of rain urged up from moist earth. When you feel this land, when you taste this land, when you hold this land, as your lungs hold your breath, you will be the rattlesnake always embracing earth with her passage. You will be the salmon, a chant whipped through the ripple. You will be the deer mouse, small feet stitching through the night. You will be the bear, thunder held in soft steps. When your songs see this land, when your ears sing this land, you will be this land. You will be this land. And a lot of what we're being about here is different ways of knowing, and certainly the poetry and the imagery gives us different ways of knowing as well. President Patton couldn't be here today, but she sent some words of welcome, so I'm going to read her words. I'm delighted to welcome you all via these remarks, and so sorry I can't join you. You are all a great example of collective genius, exemplifying the ways in which partnerships and not isolated individuals comprise the change that we need so badly. Middlebury is engaging on so many levels in environmental change via human relationships. We know you all are helping us lead the way forward. So, thank you, President Patton. So in a moment, I will introduce a Middlebury student who's going to talk further about the course. We've talked about roots. I was thinking of deep entangled roots, and I was thinking of snakes. Snakes have this amazing ability to knot their bodies together, or several of their bodies together, and then untangle. I love this imagery. You know, we tear ourselves into knots and twist and turn, and we can also untangle. And we can be a complex web, tangling and untangling, and probably that's what people have been doing for eons and eons, right? And snakes also, what do? They shed their skins to make room for new growth, casting away that which restricts their growth, that which is on the surface, no longer useful. And I love this as a metaphor for our own growth and our own way forward. The core remains, the core of the being remains, and yet there's room for growth, room for newness, and we continually are doing this, of course. Snakes do it kind of in one foul swoop each year or several years, depending on their growth rate. But we love these metaphors. We love these layers of meaning. We have a lot of words and a lot of language, and part of our ways of knowing, which I think you'll hear about from Jocelyn, is these other ways, these images, these metaphors, right? So as we grow this network through inspired conversation, I'm going to pass the mic over to Jocelyn Sullivan. Jocelyn is a super senior Feb, which means that they only have a few more months before moving from college student to college graduate. Jocelyn is a sociology major that finds interest in these new perennials conversations and the breadth of the work, with the hope that environmentalism can be a conversation and not a lab practice. They are motivated to apply ideas in community, to nourish the ways people and community interact with each other and the environment. And I'll also mention they're also involved in creative arts in the dance community and dance classes here. So thank you, Jocelyn.
Hello. So like Mark said, I have been working with this new Perennials project as a way of continuing on my engagement with this work that was introduced to me in the class, the Perennial Turn, that I took last fall. And to talk about the class, I actually want to read a line from the syllabus that sort of encapsulates what we were learning about and the way that we talked about these conversations in the classroom setting. It reads, "Together in a spirit of collegial trust, we will engage perennial ideas, practices, and frameworks, evaluate their efficacy in addressing local, regional, and planetary issues of social justice and climate stability, and participate in the imaginative work of co-creating alternative ways of thinking, eating, and being. There is work and wonder enough for each one of us in this course, regardless of major or background." And this sort of diversity of thought and content was something that was really important to me when I was taking the course, and something that really rang true. I was having conversations in other classes, like the Intro to Natural Sciences or my agroecology class, that easily fit into the ideas that we were talking about in the Perennial Turn. But I also have taken classes like global political economy and sociological theory and the history of US radicalism, along with some of the dance classes and creative classes that Mark talked about, that had space in the conversations we were having in the Perennial Turn classroom as a way of sort of always growing, always making more connections, always trying to extend out what we were actually thinking about. And another interesting way that the class was formulated was we were able to work with community members as partners in this learning, with the idea that we were having these conversations in a classroom practice, and we wanted to extend our learning out into the community and talk with people who were doing this work and thinking about these things and living it in a day-to-day way, and with the idea that through those conversations and through those connections and that relationship, we could bring back to the classroom what it meant to actually live a perennial life and embody those experiences in one's work. And so, yeah, it's been great to be a part of this project, and it's super cool that a class can turn into a conference like this, and that a class can build a network of people like those that are sitting in this room, and then hundreds of others that we are continually connected with and trying to be in conversation with. And yeah, just growing conversations, always moving towards connection. And so I'm excited to have that happen today and to see what connections and conversations that we can build from here into the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill, who's going to introduce our keynote speaker for the day.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Good morning, all. Great to see everybody here. We have students from last fall's class and students from this fall's class and some community partners and friends and guests. I'm so delighted to be able to introduce my colleague and friend, Aubrey. We've been working together since 2015. As her bio points out, she is a scholar and a teacher, a writer, and a translator, not just of languages like Omaha, but she's a translator of what I would say relationships, translating the relationships between plants and people. And that's at the center of the work she's doing, the work of the Land Institute, and now the work that we're doing here in the New Perennials Project here in Middlebury and the Champlain Valley. Aubrey and I met in 2015 when Wes Jackson, a colleague of ours and mentor and for so many of us in this room, invited a group of folks here, including Mark Lappin. Anybody else there in 2015? Yes, Lisi, right. And Wes Jackson invited us there for a 3-day conference to consider what was wrong with university education. And his premise was everything. And he asked us to imagine a new way of thinking. It was an interesting question because Jackson in the 1970s was one of the first creators of an environmental studies program at Sacramento State. So he was at the forefront in the 1970s, and he thought that environmental studies had come a long way, but maybe we needed to do more. And so he called his work now ecosphere studies. And so we met for a few summers, and thanks to some generous funding, we've been able to continue this work. And when the Land Institute decided to create a new program in ecosphere studies, there was one perfect candidate for the position, and that was Aubrey. So we're happy that she's here. She travels the world now engaging with communities and groups around these ideas. We're so happy she took the time to be with us today. So welcome, Aubrey Streit Krug.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I just want to say thank you again to the land, the homeland of the Abenaki that we're on. Thank you to the plants and animals and rocks and soils and water and air. Thanks, of course, to the organizers of this event, my colleagues, my collaborators, my inspiration, and thank you to the teachers and ancestors who make it possible for all of us to be here today. Thanks for being here with me. I also wanted to begin with a reassurance. The title of my talk is Caring for the Ecosphere, but I am not here to try to convince you to care. My goal is not to present a case for caring. There is plenty of solid, well-reasoned evidence for why we should care about plants, peoples, places, and this planet at this moment in time. So as you can see, some of the most famous images from Stefan and Rockstrom's work around planetary boundaries, a new piece that came out very recently, warning of climate emergency with the indicators all going in the wrong direction on those slides. Lives and ways of life are at stake. I also don't want to suggest that people in general should just care more, as this very common internet meme, as you can see, suggests. We just need people who care more. Of course, some people should care more, but those people are probably not the majority in this room. And those of us who do care don't need to be told that we just need to care more, as if that alone could be a solution adequate to address the scale of the problem. The amount that we already care is a struggle for many people alive at this moment. People, especially young people, are grappling with concern, worry, anxiety, fear, anger, rage, despair, grief, due to the harm that's happening and that is to come. Big feelings come when we come out of denial. Reckoning with our mortality is one thing, and in fact, a very human thing, but reckoning with the accelerated loss and extinction of species and ecosystems feels unprecedented. At the same time, many people are bravely reckoning with the impacts of historical trauma and ongoing structural violence. So, as an example, indigenous peoples who've survived genocide and catastrophic system change, and who've experienced climate change already through forced relocation on this continent, are leading advocacy efforts and doing a lot of work of care. As I heard Kwagul researcher Sarah Hunt say at a conference last week, when it comes to organizing and community events, there has to be somebody to make the sandwiches, even as we face this situation. And I want to foreground that in our thinking today. I want to foreground this premise that care is work and requires skill and effort. Now, care work in the human economy has been defined in very basic terms as work that's done in service of other people to take care of them. So it's often thought that such work is done out of a sense of responsibility or affection, or people who are willing to serve the greater good. So care work is most often associated in the literature with childcare, healthcare, and education. And caring is repetitive, incessant work that simply doesn't get done. It is ongoing. It has to be done over and over again for the system or the community to keep functioning. Care work has been treated in very particular ways in our current society and economy, at least this dominant Western one. It is feminized, which means it's not feminine, but it's stereotyped as feminine. And thus it's seen as necessary, but it's not very well rewarded in our current monetary economy, at least not in its everyday forms. It's also invisibilized, which is a very multisyllabic word to say that it is in the background. We see some of it happening, for instance, in childcare, like I named, but much of it goes unseen and unrecognized without status, such as the care work of parenting. So as feminist economists, and I showed you some of their books in an earlier slide, these feminist economists have been demonstrating for many years care work is unevenly distributed. More recent philosophical analysis, such as by Kate Mann, identifies something that she calls human giver syndrome, which depends upon the reasoning that the humanity of some humans, women, is contingent upon them primarily giving their time and bodies and attention to the moral support and needs of other humans, men. Giving care is good, but since care is work, it comes at a cost. In a world where giving care is not valued and not supported, human givers get burnt out. Now, academic fields that work with humans have long traditions of engaging with emotions and feelings and affect and care. But in the last decade or so, this interest has intensified, and there's been more attention to the idea of care work in not only social terms, but also ecological. So care work has become a concept or a tool for thinking that connects the physical labor and work with both human emotional labor and questions of ethics and politics that go beyond humans. So just a reminder, human emotional labor is when people are required to perform emotions themselves or manage other people's emotions as part of their job or ability to survive and cope in the world. I want to suggest that as we contemplate how to make decent human futures, we need care more than ever. All humans depend upon the care work of others. Every one of us in this room today is here because of other people who have cared for us, and I don't expect that to change in a world with less discretionary energy, even with the potential savings of labor that we might find in perennial agroecosystems. People need to care for each other and for plants and animals and soils and the places of this world, especially if we want that world to be just in the future. Our interdependence, as Mark spoke about earlier, our radical interdependence is not the problem. People don't need each other because we're deficient in some way. People need each other because we're social creatures. Care work is about connecting the physical and emotional labor with this ethical work of justice. Care work is a way of recognizing the reality of what people need and will continue to need, and a call for those needs to be met in ways that are equitable rather than exploitative. So you will have noticed that even though I'm not taking the time to name many of my sources, I'm hoping to show you on some of these slides some of the teachers and texts who have really informed my thinking. I want to give acknowledgement and show some of this wide body of work, the many other people who are doing this work that I'm hoping to integrate and build upon. And here's another one of those teachers, Leah Lakshmi, whose words I want to share because they have really stuck with me. So in her book, this is a recent book, Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice, she writes, I wrote this book because I believe we stand at the crossroads between both the gifts and the unexpected, inevitable collapses of our work, and we have the opportunity to dream and keep dreaming ways to build emergent, resilient care webs. I believe that our work in creating the new world depends on it, because all of us will become disabled and sick because state systems are failing, yet community is not a magic unicorn, a one-stop shop that always helps us do the laundry and be held in need. Community is not the simple or easy answer. Community is the joy and grief and work of life. To build community, rather than just change the quantity of our care or care more, I believe we need to change the quality of our care. We need to learn how to more skillfully and collectively care. We need to learn how to direct our care to what purpose. We need to learn how to recognize and value the care of others that we will depend upon as temporarily abled people. We need to learn how to join with them. We need to learn how to persist in caring down deeply, down to earth, back into the ecosphere, toward grounded imagination and liberation. So here, the title of this conference and today's work and my thinking about what it means to become grounded again, something I've been writing about for a while, is also informed by some of Bruno Latour's recent work. So if we think about care work as the work of social reproduction, the effort involved in shaping this collective sphere, I propose that we will want human societies to do this work of shaping a collective sphere that fits within our planetary sphere, planetary limits. And I believe that we should consider the ecosphere as the recipient of and the participant in this care. So I want to talk about caring for the ecosphere, which includes ourselves. The ecosphere, this word I've been using, can be understood as the dynamic mantle of life on our sun-fed planet in the Milky Way, the nexus of all these different spheres of airs and rocks and waters and creatures whose interactions together with light make life. So we can talk about the lithosphere and hydrosphere and atmosphere and biosphere. And there might also be additional layers. You see the cryosphere on this particular slide. You might think about the pedosphere of soils, the rhizosphere of the world of roots. You might also think about, like the ethnographer and ethnobotanist Wade Davis, the ethnosphere, the intellectual and spiritual web of life, the thoughts and ideas and concepts and stories and cultures on this planet. I like this ecosphere approach because of how it prioritizes integration and process across what has often been divided or made into these sort of static abstractions. The ecosphere is a way to name the particular, and I think astonishing, realization that there is a dynamic mantle of life on this planet at this time in this galactic place, and here we are, interdependent and entangled in it. I also believe that an ecospheric perspective helps us recognize the centrality of agriculture to our current relationship to the ecosphere. And an ecospheric perspective does this by helping us recognize that agriculture is not merely an environmental issue that's out there in fields that are separate from humans. Agriculture is a system that has emerged from and within the processes of this planet, in which humans and plants and tools and energy and other forms of matter and ideas are interacting to impact landscapes and redirect ecosystemic energy to humans via food. On a larger scale, agriculture impacts and redirects these Earth system processes, impacting so many of those planetary boundaries that we saw earlier, whether that's through climate and atmospheric interactions, nutrient cycling of nitrogen and phosphorus, land use and land cover change, biodiversity, all of these different planetary boundaries. And both the local and the global impacts of agriculture are mediated through what you're looking at now, the lively ecospheric nexus of soil. See if I can find my spot while you look at this beautiful Christy Belcourt image. It's a problem with writers who are putting all these things together. So I want to talk a little bit about the Ecosphere Studies program through which Bill and I and so many of you here are collaborating, and how it helps us recognize how agriculture is not just only out there, but also in here and in our relationships as humans. How we feed ourselves is how we express our relationship to the ecosphere that constitutes our bodies, including our material relationships and our social relationships to human beings and communities. So my angle into all of this is through agriculture, because these agricultural landscapes, the legacy of the past millennia of how we've been feeding ourselves, including the social and institutional and economic and educational structures that have emerged with agriculture, they are the reality of the world in which we are in. These are not out there, they're in here, we are in them, and we have to learn in these situations and context how to care about what and who with. Agriculture in the ecosphere has a structure that we can start to see and help shape differently if we want to succeed in living differently. And I think that care can be a tool for thinking and feeling and acting differently. Like all tools, it can be misused or it can be used skillfully. It's a social technology that is not unique to humans, but that maybe makes it even more important to learn how to do well. So in material terms, as you may know and as you've heard a little bit about, the Land Institute is looking to perennial polycultures that have populated landscapes across the ecosphere for inspiration about how to develop a new agricultural system with perennial grain crops grown in mixtures. So this image, this figure, is from a recent paper exploring if the future of agriculture is perennial that sparked an international conference in May in Sweden, where more than 90 researchers gathered to share results and plan new research. The results so far suggest that perennial polycultures may better approximate the original ecosystem services provided by wild ecosystems. These services were the ones disturbed with the dominance of annual monoculture food systems. In annual grain monocultures, we have to use inputs, primarily through fossil fuels, to compensate for the loss of these services and grow the majority of calories consumed by humans. So now the Land Institute and our collaborators are not only breeding and domesticating these new perennial grain crops for the first time in human history, we're also doing agroecological studies to better demonstrate how these new systems might hold on to soil and restore ecosystem services. And we might understand these ecosystem services metaphorically as the way the ecosphere cares for us. In contrast and in complement to this, in social terms, I'd like to suggest the way that we care for the ecosphere might involve learning to value care work and learning how to care for these new perennial grain crops and each other at the same time. So if we think of ecosystem services as describing the background work of ecosystems that's necessary to sustain human life, we know that they're not fully understood or valued, and yet they're increasingly being harmed. We might think about in parallel care work as the background work of our lives and jobs that's necessary for our communities to sustain human life, but is similarly undervalued and often degraded. So we could say maybe that care is about loving and doing the seeming background work of the world, except there is no background here on Earth. Let's see if I can find this. There's no background because we're embedded. Even if we are disconnected, we are still constituted by and embedded in our places in this planet. For worse, sometimes for better, hopefully, we still need ecosystem services and care work to continue. And we need them to be valued, which is not to say appropriated by our current global economic system, but valued in real and material terms. So as part of this new Perennials project, the Ecosphere Studies program I direct works to integrate sociocultural research and educational projects with agroecology. We think that new crops open new possibilities, ecologically and socially, but positive change in people's behavior is not inevitable with changing plants. We know that human community behavior is constructed by society as well as evolved biologically, and in both cases, it's deeply shaped by our access to energy. Humans are land animals, and humans are social creatures. If we want to transform agriculture for the better, we have to pay attention to both society and ecology together, which leads us to this question that drives our work. If the ecological future of agriculture is to be diverse and perennial, what is required of us in social terms? I believe this is a question that's fundamentally about what human communities are willing and able to learn, maybe for the first time ever. And at the same time, I realize that as a teacher, as a writer, no human community or being is a blank slate. We are already deeply enculturated. So to learn something new or remember something that other humans have known but we may have forgotten, we may need to unlearn. We need to be willing to let go of things, to let go of denial, of domination, to let go of our current systems and structures if we really want to care for the ecosphere. And the best way I've found so far to try to hold this paradox of learning and unlearning in my mind is to picture a threshold. A threshold is an entry point, a doorway. It comes from the word thresh, which, as you know, is separating the grain from the stalks and the chaff. So a threshold is that sill under the door that contained the thresh within the domus, within the house. People step on the threshold with their feet, just like you step on plants to beat the grain from the straw. So the threshold, the word, reminds us of threshing. There's also a recent framework that grows out of educational research that informs this idea of threshold concepts, which are basically ways to name the things that one must know in order to participate in a discipline or a research community. A threshold concept is the entry point or the portal through which one must pass the transformed ways of thinking or feeling or behaving that one must acquire. Threshold concepts come at a cost. They are not easy to achieve. They take journeys to get to through the other side, and you have to lose and unlearn things along the way in order to pass through. So threshold concepts are often defined in these four terms. They're transformative, they're integrative, those are positive things. They're irreversible, which feels a little more terrifying maybe, and they're troublesome. They are hard. They require something of us. I believe, as we can see in this image contrasting the rhizospheres of intermediate wheatgrass or kernza and annual wheat, that perenniality and diversity may be threshold concepts. So ever since I interned at the Land Institute back in 2005 as an undergraduate, I've been working to learn these concepts of perenniality and diversity and unlearn my sense of our current agricultural system as natural and normal. As if drawn slowly in fits and starts through a passageway over these last decade and more, I've been struggling with these transformative and integrative, but also irreversible and troublesome concepts that challenge how I think and how I feel and how I act. So they've been challenging me to change my perception of my family's home place. This is an annual wheat field that my dad has farmed and my grandpa farmed before him. And to shift my thinking towards this native ecosystems, this mixed grass prairie, which holds quite a bit of perenniality and diversity, which is also my family's relationship with land. And in trying to do this learning from here to here and back and forth again so many times, I have not been alone. As Bill mentioned, we're part of a growing community of people working to cross these thresholds together. This map is already outdated, I'm happy to say. This is part of the global community of practitioners working to make knowledge about transforming agriculture and the ecosphere from a system of extractive domination to one of generative care. And these projects are emerging with all sorts of collaborators. I believe we need to create this more equitable network of ecospheric care in order to help build the capacity and conditions and institutions necessary for just transformation and transition. So our work has taken us to many places, most recently to Palestine, where the community-based research group Makaneat seeks to apply agroecology to bring about positive change at the landscape scale in an incredibly tenuous place with some of the most complicated social and political systems and structures of the world. This is also one of the origin places of grain agriculture 12 or 14,000 years ago. So Mach and the rest of their group are exploring plant species, especially native wild legumes, that could be developed as new perennial grain or companion crops in the Mediterranean region. And older women in particular here are the carriers of knowledge about these wild edible plants. Here in the US, we've also convened a series of workshops over the last year in Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Texas to test ecospheric approaches to learning and unlearning and to build community. One of the activities we've used, pictured here, is the making of hikaru dorodongo, or shiny dumplings in Japanese, which we think of as ecospheres made out of soil and made through long processes of work with our hands. And the participants in these workshops have included farmers, scientists, activists, historians, writers, and practitioners in the creative and healing arts. Since in this long-term process of domestication and the creation of new crops, both people and plants change together and coevolution, we're also collaborating with one of our perennial plant breeding programs to initiate a new experiment in civic science. So Silphium integrifolium, the plant that you see here, is a native perennial prairie plant that's being domesticated for oilseeds production. And in our civic science pilot project, we invite people to care for this perennial plant that could care for us. So this past summer, we sent out Silphium seedlings to more than 40 people who've been growing and tending these plants in 18 states across the country. I'll show you a picture of Silphium in bloom and one of our project participants here in Pennsylvania. We believe that through this work, we have an opportunity to make new forms of relationship between Silphium and people. So we're learning how to organize this community to gather information about how Silphium responds to a lot of different growing environments, and monitoring the pollinators and pests and pathogens. We think that information will be helpful for our breeding work. But our civic science collaborators are also sharing their experiences of caring for Silphium. They have to do labor in terms of watering and weeding and observing the plants. They are explaining this project to their family and neighbors. They're sending in photographs and emailing us with questions. And we survey them to ask how their experiences and their choices are informing how this work, this ongoing care work they're doing, shapes their learning and understanding. Will they develop stronger emotional attachments to just their particular Silphium plants or plants more broadly or to the planet or places as a whole? Will their understanding of threshold concepts like diversity and perenniality change or deepen? Will their direct and active involvement in this research matter for their own mindsets, for their hearts, beyond the fate of these seedlings? Will they start to perceive Silphium as a beautiful native ornamental plant? Will they start to perceive it and value it as a future crop? So answering these questions involves methods from across academic disciplines, and we're really excited to undertake this community-based work because we need to understand how learning to involve a broad representation of people, including groups and regions often disconnected from science, early in this process can increase the rate and the quality of domestication. Ultimately, we're trying to live into a world in which caring for the ecosphere is valued. We're trying to transition our agricultural economies to fit within these planetary limits, and it's hard to understate what's at stake in this work. We have no way of knowing the outcome. What we have is an opportunity to increase our moral imagination and enact agricultural transformation. People everywhere have choices: what to carry forward, what to leave behind, what to accept, and perhaps most excitingly, as I suggest, what to learn for the first time. Even as some options close down, new options are opening with the possibility of these perennial grain crops and new ways of feeding ourselves. But I believe that any new tool must be accompanied by a radical change in human relationships if it's to really be transformative. We have an opportunity to care in new ways, not just care more, but to care more wisely. So I'd like to conclude by bringing these ideas back down to earth. What does caring for the ecosphere look like in practical terms? What does it cause us to think and feel and do that we haven't done before? So along with divesting our dollars and demanding our institutions do the same, I think that we can divest our collective attention from systems that are based upon productivity and perpetual growth economically and energetically. We can drop our most comfortable tools, our habits of mind, our automatic rationalizations, our hard-fought individual identities, our trusty methods. We can drop these when they no longer fit the situation at hand. We can enter the threshold, we can unlearn. We can recognize what we've been given and choose to give our gifts when they're actually needed and valued. And we can surrender any sense of entitlement and turn toward a gift economy that operates within limits. Second, we can hold on moment by moment. We can stoke our motivation, our persistence, our willingness and commitment to come back over and over again to the basic, very messy, utterly human work of making and maintaining communities who care for land, soil, and crops. We can hold on to and remember what humans have come to know through much of our species' history. Third, we can make anew. We can collectively make new languages, new feelings, new rituals, and new relationships. We can let what needs to decay, and allow ourselves to become that hungry caterpillar who, after eating so very much, goes into a chrysalis, turns to goo, and emerges as something new. This moment on this planet can be a bottleneck, a narrowing of possibility, or it can become one of metamorphosis. Fourth, and finally, we can be brave. Courage is needed to quickly take down the industries doing the most harm and to face up to the consequences and choices at hand now in our climate emergency. Courage is also needed to slow down, to root down, to be together, to tend to each other, to listen, and to learn. So thank you so much for being here with me today, and I'm really excited about our conversation and ongoing discussion. Thank you.
Aubrey, thank you. That was inspiring, delicious, and scaring all at the same time. Brilliant. Thank you. So hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Nadine. I think I know almost everyone here in the room. If I don't know you, I'll know you after today, I hope. So now we're going to turn to a part of our morning program that involves our community partners from the course. And just to sort of also orient around, the course itself is co-taught by three people. Bill Vitek, who is our philosopher, Mark Lappin, who's our ecologist and guru, and myself, Nadine Barnacle, with a background in communications, and with a lot of years in the environmental world doing community-connected work. So another thing to just keep in mind, we're going to move to our different spheres with someone from each one. There are 5 from 12 community partners from the semester. We are asking you to listen to them and actually hold your questions, because if you see on your table, a couple things too, there's name tags on each table. There are sign-up sheets. We'd love you to please sign up, leave your name if you're not already on my mailing list. But please do so anyway so we know you were here. And there's also index cards and places for you to put questions and thoughts as people are speaking. We're going to ask you to hold your thoughts and questions as you hear from each of our presenters today, because we're going to come together after they all present and break out by our spheres, which so many of you are already sitting by, which doesn't lock you into your morning by any stretch. You're free to float spheres and move across borders. And go with the diversity that inspires you. But hold those thoughts, and after these presentations, we're going to break, and we're going to come back together at about 11:30 and talk for 2 different time periods, for about 20 minutes each. We're going to talk at within each sphere, and in 20 minutes we'll ring a bell, and you can move around or you can stay at your table. So that's going to be the place for question and answers. That's going to be the place to just share what you've been thinking as you've absorbed the talks from all of our presenters. So they're going to spend about 10 to 12 minutes each. We're going to ring a little bell at about 10 minutes, which I don't think I told each of you, because I didn't see you all before you got here. Hi, Corie. We're so glad you're here. And also thank you to everyone for being here. So first off, we're going to hear from Corie Pierce. Corie is actually an alum, and I meant to email you and say what year. A Middlebury alum. Feb 97, fabulous. And she started Bread and Butter Farm up in South Burlington in 2009 with the goal of creating a true community farm. The vision for the farm was to be a hub for several families to work and live, stewarding land and growing food that would be regenerative in nature. She began working on a veggie farm at 14, fell in love with the power of growing food and building community, and aims to do this now up in the lower Chittenden County and greater Chittenden County area. She lives with her partner, Chris Dorman, who's a musician, their 2 kids, as well as 2 other families. One of the things that's really unique, and I think Corie will get into this, that we're really happy is she's reclaiming and restoring, along with the farm that they currently have. They're also getting out into 600 acres adjacent to their farm and basically restoring soil. So she's going to be wonderful to hear from her. There isn't someone here it's not going to be wonderful to hear from. Second, we're going to hear from Sister Gail Worcelo, who's from the Green Mountain Monastery. Sister Gail is a Catholic sister and co-founder of the Green Mountain Monastery, along with Bernadette Bostwick and the late passionate priest and cultural historian Thomas Berry. And that's located up in Greensboro, Vermont. And that was new to me as I got to know Thomas Berry, that he's buried right here in Vermont with us. So having that spirit, Gail's going to bring that spirit and her work with us. And the Green Mountain Monastery is part of a new emergence in Catholic tradition that seeks to give expression to a spirituality rooted in understanding ourselves as part of one single sacred earth community. And I think that you're going to hear that theme over and over here today. Our third presenter, who is representing our education sphere, is Matt Schlein. He founded and is a master's MSW and is a former actor, writer, storyteller, has spent the last 20 years as founder and director of both the Walden Project and the Willowell Foundation. The Walden Project takes students out of the traditional classroom and provides students grades 10 to 12 in an interdisciplinary writing and environmental studies immersion in the woods of Vermont. And just to also note, the beauty of the Walden Project is it is based and rooted in the public school system of the Virgins, sort of Addison Central Supervisory Union. And so what's incredible with that is working within the system, Matt has been able to go out there and provide alternative ways of being and thinking to our precious children of this area. So the Willowell Foundation is a nonprofit devoted to the consilience of arts education and the environment in addition to artists' residencies, summer camps, forest preschools. And Willowell advocates for holistic solutions that connect people with the environment themselves and each other. Then we'll hear from Thomas Jackson, who represents our our healing arts sphere. And he is both a local licensed practitioner, psychotherapist, but also a mind-body medicine faculty practitioner. He's a graduate of Trinity College, Dublin, and Hunter College School of Social Work, and worked with a wide variety of populations in New York City and Vermont. Completed his studies in Brooklyn at the Institute for Psychoanalysis and Psychotherapy, where he went on to become a board member. For 30 years, he has studied and practiced many of the techniques championed by the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. In addition to teaching practitioners this model, he's facilitated mind-body groups at the Pine Ridge Reservation, located in the state of South Dakota, and in Broward County, Florida, with those impacted by the Parkland shootings. So he has been very involved at some of the roots of our suffering and traumas. Aware of the power of group, he's very grateful to be facilitating groups and especially interested in this model's applicability for students and migrant workers. And finally, from our creative arts, we will hear and see and share some time with Nancy Winship Milliken. And Nancy defines her art as contemporary pastoralism and is inspired by our age-old relationship to nature as a way to consider ecological questions in the present. She creates environmental and site-specific sculptures in both urban and rural settings using natural materials like sheep's wool or mud from pasture fields. Her pieces interact with the environment and are activated by ephemeral forces such as wind, rain, and sun, calling attention to the textures, odors, and movement of natural materials composed in formally simple structures. And based in Vermont, we were very lucky to have her here working with our soils and a lot of the nature and exposed elements that we know here in place. She spends much of her time in self-directed residencies on farms where her work addresses complex issues involved in sustainable living. So with that, I'm going to turn that over to our first presenter, Corie, who is going to share with us her work.
So hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. And hearing everybody who spoke, I just like sparking, like, oh my gosh, and that, and that, oh yes, and that. That's exactly what I'm thinking about. So it was really amazing to just hear all like your longer speech and talk was so inspiring, and just the poem. I'm so connected to it. So many things. So it's wonderful to be here. And I did graduate from Middlebury almost 25-ish years ago. I was a Feb, and I was a biology major and an ES minor, and I will share a little secret. Bill, I don't know where Bill is, but when he said that he had the meeting saying like what's wrong with higher education, and the consensus was everything, I was an environmental ed major here. We didn't speak of the impact that agriculture has on environmental issues 25 years ago. I'm like, what the heck? So that's a little secret. I think we have come far. There were a lot of great things I did get out of my education here, so I don't mean to say it's not. Okay, so I am the owner of, I loved Middlebury. I'm the owner of Bread and Butter Farm. I started Bread and Butter Farm 10 years ago. And it's been quite a journey. So the core of what we do is obviously grow food and try to feed our community. We try to mimic natural ecosystems as best we possibly can, and to build soil. The way that I look at farming, yes, our mission is to grow food, because to me that's what I feel like is we have the opportunity to connect people is with food. We can fight about so many things in this world, including food, but we can't deny that we all need food to survive. And so I see food as being able to be something that can actually really unify us. And however, the way I've approached farming, it might not be quite what I think many people think of when they think of farming. And that brings me back to when I was a really little girl. I grew up not on a farm, and I grew up in New Hampshire, so it was fairly rural, but kind of in a not really suburb, but not really rural either. My grandparents actually, both sets lived in Vermont, so we spent a lot of time coming to Vermont, into very rural parts of Vermont in the Northeast Kingdom. So I was exposed to that really rural life very young, and I fell in love with it. And I was just the kind of kid that just wanted and needed to be outside all the time. I wanted to be digging around in the soil and playing with bugs and finding bugs and like touching everything. I wanted to get to know every animal that came across my path. I just felt a kinship there. I felt at home in the woods. So very early on, though, for me, a question was going around in my mind as a little kid, like, why are humans so completely different than every other species that I see? Why are we not able to just like look? I looked at every other species and I could see they just lived. They just found their food. They made their homes. They just lived. They were completely self-contained and cyclical and interactive with each other. And I just always looked at humans like we have these elaborate buildings and we have all this clothing. We have all this stuff that we need to live. Why? That was something that perplexed me from like some of my earliest memories, and I'm frankly still perplexed by that. I felt as I got older, the need for stuff, the need for kind of like shielding ourselves or blocking ourselves from the natural world became more relevant, more obvious, and saddened me. And as I started to learn, as a teenager, started to learn about real environmental issues in our world, I started to also get really sad and to learn that humans were at the hand of a lot of these issues. So I was struggling with that. I still these questions of like, what do humans have to do with all of this? Almost by accident, very thankfully, I fell into farming. My parents insisted that my sisters and I get jobs when we were in 9th grade. And I was terrified to get a job that brought me indoors more. And luckily, I found a job on a farm in New Hampshire. It was a vegetable farm, 20-acre vegetable farm. And literally, the first day on the farm, I remember to this day vividly, and I fell in love with it. I ended up working there for 7 years, mostly in the summers, and then more and more and more as a Feb here. I actually because I was a Feb, I got to work that whole summer and through that entire fall and into January before I came to Middlebury, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And I fell in love with it for so many reasons. I was amazed that we could grow so much food. I just loved learning the science behind growing of food in that way. I fell in love with the fact that this was like real physical work. I fell in love with the fact that this family who owned the farm, and it was a young couple who had just taken over from one of the owner's parents. I fell in love with the fact that our work directly impacted their livelihood. They had a very active farm stand, and I fell in love with the fact that the community, this is in the late 80s into the 90s, so before kind of this like local farming movement was really a real thing, but the community there just absolutely appreciated being able to go to their farm stand and buy fresh summer produce. I just loved all of that. It just was like, it hit on all cylinders for me. So then I get to college. I'm still farming. I start thinking I really want to have a farm when I'm, as a career, which I was also crazy. My parents thought that was totally crazy. And most people I knew thought that was crazy because who gets into farming who doesn't grow up on a farm? But I wanted to do that. I just didn't know how to do it. But I started learning even post-college really about the detriment of agriculture and how agriculture is at the root cause of so much of the issues that we're facing. And I was like, whoa, the thing that I love and I want to go do and I thought was so connective for me and so at the core is actually doing so much of the damage that we're talking about here. And I was pretty devastated. And that's what got my brain thinking, there's got to be a way that we can produce food as humans and do it in a way that's not fighting against our natural systems and not being destructive, but is actually regenerative. And I didn't know that there was a lot of farms out there kind of doing this and people thinking about this, because most of what you see and are learning about and just driving around is all of the destruction. But I started finding those farms and finding those people and seeing the nuance between organic to conventional and everything in between, and that or not just because you're organic doesn't mean you're doing things right, and just because you're conventional doesn't mean you're doing things bad, and the whole spectrum. Animal agriculture versus vegetables, everything, grains, all of this was like, there's so much to learn there. So I launched myself onto this path of saying, okay, if I'm going to farm for a living, if I'm going to figure out how to do this, I need to figure out how to do it in a way that is regenerative. So it took me a while. So fast forward until I was 35 and paid off student debt and got some other skills because the idea of farming wasn't a guarantee, still isn't. But by the time I was 35, I moved back to Vermont and found out about the Vermont Land Trust and what they do to get new farmers onto land that is at a more affordable rate. And we found a farm, and we're on the town line of Shelburne in South Burlington, 143 acres. And we purchased the farm with the idea to start a very diversified, regenerative farm that we had big vision for. So we wanted it to be multiple. So another issue that I saw was that a lot of farms were, of course, going out of business. Family farms, as we knew them, were dying. Families, it was like really not a good way of life anymore to farm. farms were struggling, kids were wanting to leave their farms. So I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to launch into this, I had a kid at this point, how do I do this in a way that isn't just this isolating, sort of everything in, just like making, a lifestyle that my kids are just going to want to leave, and then I'm going to be burned out and want to leave myself. So the vision has been to have multiple families on our farm where we can work collaboratively, where we can support each other, to grow and raise as many things as we can, so we can really create a very diversified ecosystem, and to have the crops and the animals that we're raising for the food that we're going to be selling as integrated as much as we possibly can into the natural ecosystem. To normalize farming in our community was a big mission. So in other words, to make farming not feel like this isolated kind of weird thing, but actually celebrated and honored. So in other words, we wanted to rebuild the connection that most people, in my experience, have lost to the land and to where their food comes from, and to make our farm be a place where people can come, interact with, engage in, see where their food is grown, but then also find ways for them to engage there, whether it's coming to, of course, shop for their food, but also find ways to just commune and be together. So the vision and what we have done is to do lots of other programs, including camps and a year-round program for kids called Village School, and a music program that my husband runs for young families. So vision continues, and we're at the very cusp of, is to just make farming in our community feel like this is a normal way of life, and to bring these kids, these adults, these elderly people, everyone, every age, to live all the way through these generations and eventually die on our farm, and reconnect to the natural life cycle of farming and our human community, and have that be just an example on our farm. So I'm not going to show any pictures because my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Corie. One thing that's great, you'll have time to share more with Corie later this morning when we come together, and there's a beautiful website to explore and to basically take some time to get to know Corie as the morning goes on. So thank you. Okay, next we have Sister Gail.
Good morning, everyone. As I begin, I'd like to ask you to stand up, please. Just shake your body out, because so much has come in, and we want to get it in our bodies as well as in our heads. So give yourselves a shake. Just wake up the chi. Look around. If you see anyone that looks like they need their chi waking up, give them a nice tap on the back or wake up their chi. Oh, good. Take a stretch. Another breath. Shake it out. Ah, feels good. Now, in addition to thanking all that has been thanked, in our conference so far, I wanted to begin by thanking the primal fireball, the initial flaring forth at the beginning of time. I want to thank that together by just moving our hands in a prayer posture, and from the heart, just thank that initial flaring forth that has unfolded for 13.8 billion years and has gotten us to this moment. Okay, lovely. So I'll begin now with a poem. You could stand up if you want, or sit, however. I'm going to begin with a poem by Wendell Berry. And he writes, "When I was a young man, grown up at last, how large I seemed to myself. I was a tree, tall already, and what I had not yet reached, I would grow to reach. Now, 30 more years added on, I have reached much I did not expect, in a direction unexpected. I am growing downward." What does it mean to you right now to grow downward? My mentor, Thomas Berry, the late cultural historian and Catholic priest and self-acclaimed geologian, said that in order to grow downward, we also have to grow outward, to orient ourselves within the comprehensive context of an unfolding 13.8 billion year universe. Particularly when, as in our time, our cultural coding no longer has the capacity or wisdom to bring us forward in any viable way. We need to turn at times like these to our genetic coding, or we can say to our cosmological coding or intelligence to give us direction. Thomas Berry needed a place to brood, as he said, a place to think deeply. And he said, the only two places I can think of where I could brood and think deeply would be jail or the monastery. So in the end, he chose the monastery. And he entered a monastery of Catholic priests, sisters, and brothers. And in that place of brooding, out came his many books that orient us to our role as humans in the unfolding story of the universe. I met Thomas Berry in 1983 because I entered the same monastery. I didn't know about Thomas Berry at the time, but he was part of the same monastery that I happened to join. And early on in our studies, Thomas oriented us, our theology, our spirituality, the future of our ministry within the universe story. And one of his seminal pieces, entitled The Spirituality of Earth, in that piece, Thomas said, we need a spirituality born of the fireball itself. There, in our initial flaring forth, the primal elements were shaped both in their physical, material, and psychic spiritual aspects. We are the generation of humans who have extended our senses through telescope and microscope and radio antenna to such an extent that the flattened aspects of time that have shaped all generations before us has opened up to new dimensions, giving us the capacity to see back into time, back into space, and back into history. So we could say that we have been given a deep time view, that we can now see the universe as a single sacred unfolding, a creative emergence. And we could observe that from the beginning, the universe has had both a deep inner dimension that has been evolving together with its physical expression. So maybe what we could say is that this journey of the interior and the exterior of the primal flaring forth has been a transformative journey of matter toward ever more complete spiritual intercommunion with itself. So the physical spiritual journey of a universe that seeks to come into greater wholeness and communion with its own self. And we're participating in that journey. So what is the spirituality of the fireball? And how does it apply to us today? How does it apply? So I'm representing the faith sphere of the conference. And so the question is how does it apply to faith, to spirituality, to agriculture, to really to any of our spheres here? So I want to just mention, I want to focus on 3 ways that the spirituality of the fireball can apply to us today. And so it has to go, it goes like this. If the fireball has a spirituality, what is it? It must show itself in the direction that it moves in. Now, Thomas Berry said the direction that the fireball moves in, it goes in 3 directions simultaneously, at all times and in all places throughout its 13.8 billion year journey. So we should pay attention to that. And the 3 directions of the fireball is that the fireball moves to differentiation at all times and in all places. It moves towards greater interiority or subjectivity and towards more intimate communion. So because it does this at all times and in all places, Thomas Berry called it the footprints of God. I love that metaphoric, poetic way of saying that, that these three represent cosmic intelligence. And as I said before, when our cultural coding fails us, which it's failing us, it doesn't have the wisdom to bring us forward, we have to go back to the genetic coding or the coding of the cosmos. And so these three principles are principles of code. These principles were not created by any political system, by any man or hierarchical president, or not anybody. These principles are universe principles, so we can't argue with these principles. You could fight anything else, but you can't fight the principles. So we got to pay attention to them. So what do the principles mean, quickly? The first principle is the principle of, or the pattern of differentiation. So we find ourselves in a universe that's differentiated. Just look around the room, look around at your table. Nobody is the same. If everyone looked like you, it would be the most boring situation, wouldn't it, right? If you only had one of something, it would be, you would eventually collapse. We wouldn't have the capacity to go. Now, this universe didn't have to be this way. It could have been a universe of homogeneous smudge, a collapse into uniformity on the large scale. But no, this universe moves towards greater difference. And the principle of differentiation is the greater the difference, the healthier the system. Now, the greater the difference, the healthier the system. Subjectivity, the universe is made of subjects. So we're talking here, when we talk about subjects, we're talking about the interior dimension of everything that exists. Another way of saying that is to be a subject, is to be a space in which the universe acts. To be is to be a space in which the fireball acts. And each subject has its own interior or inner articulation within itself. Each subject carries the numinous mystery from which the universe emerges. And then the last principle, of course, is communion. And that basically means, right, to be is to be in relationship. And in this universe, we could, so to sum up the three principles, we could say that the universe is a communion experience of differentiated subjectivities. The universe, right, is a communion experience of differentiated subjectivities. So then the question is, okay, let's say it again. What is the spirituality of the fireball? The spirituality of the fireball says is the greatest differentiation that we can hold, the deepest subjectivity we can allow for, and the most intimate communion we can bear. You take any one of those away, and the universe collapses. So, now, when we were asked to speak, the question that Nadine gave us is, what are we doing to recover place? So this is my answer. Okay, this is my answer. I'm answering you, Nadine, by saying that in my place, which is Green Mountain Monastery, specifically, which is in Greensboro, Vermont, what we're doing to recover place is to uphold difference in all its forms, to deepen subjectivity, and to live inside of communion, of the communion. So here we go. Okay, so to deepen differentiation in all of its forms. So we want to uphold difference everywhere. Difference in ideas, great. Difference in perspectives, great. Difference in gender orientation, difference in gender expression, difference in species, in soils, in plants, difference in religion and in culture. And then we want to look at our violations. Okay, where are we in violation of the principle of differentiation? Well, whenever there's a monoculture, we're violating a universe principle. When we have the Coca-Colaization of the world, we're violating a principle of differentiation. America First. So all of these are violations or monocultures of the mind. They're violating a universe principle. Subjectivity. Subjectivity. Okay. I'm like you. I lost the page. Okay, hang on a minute. Okay. Give me a moment. I gotta find my page. Anyway, I'll just talk from here. Subjectivity. Everything is a subject. So the tree is saying we're a community too. The animals, I'm not just a hamburger. I'm a subjectivity. The potato, I am a subject. I am a subjectivity. Black Lives Matter, the rights of Mother Earth, etc. This is rising up in our planet. Subjectivity, the notion of everything as an expression of the numinous divine is rising up because the voices are saying, I'm a subject too. And so we look at, in our place, and I'm challenging you to look at the places in which you violate the subjectivity of other. So think about, how are the animals treated that land on your dinner plate? Do you eat Pringles, the prostitution of the potato? You know, taking a potato and prostituting it into a thing called a Pringle? That is a violation of the subjectivity of a potato. And then, and then communion. Okay, communion. Communion, our global commons. So, you know, we're all engaged in trying to recover our whole fabric, and that's the point of the perennial turn. It's the coming back to the spirituality of the fireball. So I like to propose that the perennial turn is the spirituality of the fireball, and living these principles out, you know, and applying these universe principles to all of our work, to agriculture, to planting, to what you're going to do too in the world when you leave the room. So when our cultural coding loses its capacity to guide us, then we have to return to our cosmic coding. And the three principles of differentiation, subjectivity, and communion are the codes. They are the primal codes that we have to be obedient to. And so my last three images have to do with just my own tradition. I come out of the Christian tradition. And the Christian tradition uses wheat to make the bread, you know, to celebrate the Eucharist on Sunday morning. But my proposition is that Sunday morning really doesn't matter if you don't have the consciousness of the principles inside the bread of the Eucharist to know that the supernova is the place in which the bread comes from, because once the supernova exploded, all of its elements, calcium and iron and potassium, that this was what set the table. We wouldn't have a table if it wasn't for the supernova. It's the table setter. And is the bell? Oh, and my last slide. Okay. I don't know what I'm saying about this one, but anyway, it's to touch the earth. And so in that bread of breaking, the bread we break and the cup we share, the consciousness of the three principles has to be in the bread. That is the true Eucharist. Thank you.
That's fabulous, Sister Gail. And as we segue into Matt Schlein and hearing about the Willow Foundation and the Walden Project and whatever wisdom he'll impart upon us, I want to remind us that spirituality, respire, everyone breathe, respire, inspire, and let's conspire in communion together as we welcome Matt.
Hi, it's a real pleasure to be here today with you all, and a variety of media entertainment available to us. My name is Matt Schlein. I am with the Walden Project and the Willow Foundation, and for the last 20 years, I've been really exploring the question of how do we relate with ourselves, how do we relate with the natural world, and how do we form a sense of community, particularly among young people today. I think for the issues around global climate change, they impact this next generation far more significantly than we do, and they feel it. They feel a sense of urgency. And I think it's really important that the adults in the room or in the woods, where we is our primary context, that we have real, authentic conversations, and that we look squarely at what's going on, and we hopefully find some solutions and some hope out of these really intense circumstances that we are all looking at, but the youth most significantly. I want to begin, I guess, by saying thank you so much for this opportunity to speak here today with such amazing people. It's really a really amazing collective here, and I hope that I can add a little bit to the conversation. I was thinking about my work, and specifically in the context of what we just heard, this notion of differentiation, subjectivity, and communion. It speaks really deeply to what it is that we try to do out at the Willowell Foundation. So I'm going to give a real quick overview of the Willowell Foundation, a real quick overview of the Walden Project, and primarily focus my discussion today on that. The Willowell Foundation is a 501c3 based out of Moncton, Vermont. It was inspired by a conversation in the 90s around E.O. Wilson's book, Consilience, and we thought that it's important that we don't just enjoy these ideas, but we say, how can we enact these truths? How can we create systems that are not ontologically reductive, but in fact bring these questions together, much like we're doing today, because the questions of education, the questions of public health, the questions of nutrition, the questions of spirituality, these are all entwined. They're not isolated. And so Wilson's view definitely guides the work that we do. To that end, we've created a variety of different programs. The Walden Project is probably our most well-articulated, and I'll be speaking about that. The short form of it is it's high school in the woods, so rather than students meeting in a classroom, we meet around the fire. It's a public school program, and it is completely free to the participants, and we're very proud of that. We're going into our 20th year. But we also do a lot of other projects. We've started the Wren's Nest Preschool in the last 5 years as a forest preschool program. We have artist residencies. Sometimes we get involved in projects that are maybe just for a year or two. We were involved in the Vermont Sail Freight Project a number of years ago. The goal of that was to try to find a carbon neutral way to move shelf-stable produce down to New York City. So we created a barge, a lot of partnership. I think we won in the war of ideas, but in the war of economics, maybe not so much. But I think it's important to try. You know, there's that great quote by Samuel Beckett, fail, fail again, fail better. So I've got a lot of really great failures under my belt that I'm super proud of. So in addition to that, we sponsor artist residencies. This year we're looking forward to having Haitian artist Engels come up. He'll be working with students at Middlebury High School, as well as Verdennes High School, and well as students at the Walden Project. So we wear lots of hats. Some of them are ongoing, some of them are project specific. So I'm going to transition now to talking a little bit more about the Walden Project, which I think in many ways is emblematic of the larger goals that we're trying to achieve as an organization. And I like to think that we're a pretty hopeful story. Just to go a little bit back into the annals of history, July 4th, 1845, Henry David Thoreau walks out of the town of Concord, Massachusetts. He says it wasn't that like there was rah-rah America is born spirit that was going on, but I like to think about the image of everyone was celebrating this idea of freedom in a very exterior way, but for Thoreau, that question was interior. I'm part of this free society, and the generation that's come of age just after the Revolution, you know, and in Concord, the Revolution was very much alive for Thoreau, but the question was, well, what do I do with this freedom I have? He had just lost his brother to a tragic shaving accident, of all things, and he was completely devastated. You know, it's not, now we can look back at him as one of the archetypes of the environmental movement, but at the time when he did that, he was better known for being that weird guy that walked around a lot that burned down hundreds of acres of local woodlands in a cook fire gone awry. So this was not like the rock star that we like to think of now, or at least we eco-dorks like to think of him as a rock star. So Thoreau's time out at Walden Pond is 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. It was essential for figuring out the core of who he was, the core of the philosophy that would define the subsequent years. While he was there, he wrote Civil Disobedience. He finished up A Week in the Concord and Merrimack River, kept journals that evolved into Walden. But really what he was doing was he was mining his soul. He was going deeply into the place where he lived to discover a sense of who it is that he was. And that's really what we're doing out at Walden. Rather than meeting in the classroom, we're meeting out in the woods. And I feel like that this is something that's really important in what we do. And I feel like perhaps the greatest lessons that we provide at Walden is giving students the opportunity to be immersed in the natural world. The Jewish philosopher Martin Buber talks about the difference between an I-it relationship to the world and an I-thou relationship to the world. The I-thou relationship implies a certain subjectivity, a certain reciprocity that goes on. And I think for young people today, they need to understand that reciprocity, not in an intellectual way, but in a way that it's in their bones. The design of the program, we go out in late summer, throw on backpacks into the Green Mountains. We enjoy the harvest of the fall. We go into the deep, deep, dark, cold winters. We are outside every day, regardless of how cold it is. And then we emerge out later in the springtime. And that's metaphoric to the growth process that young people are going through. And it gives them an authentic context in which to engage that growth process. So I don't know if any people have been forced to spend much time in a typical public school, but it's got all the charm of a prison. And I'm not being facetious when I say that. The Mount Abe School, where there are great teachers and great students, but that building was designed by people who also designed prison systems. And oftentimes the controls with the bells, with the lights, here's the drill, got to do this, the mass movements. This is not what young people need to be inspired about the world. This is not how we prepare them to face the really significant challenges that they are going to need to face. So that's, I guess, some philosophical context, some practical context in terms of what it looks like. We meet out in the woods on a 230-acre tract of land owned by the Willowell Foundation. We get off the bus. A school bus drops the kids off in the morning, picks them up in the afternoon, but rather than walk to a classroom, they walk down a third of a mile into a cedar grove around a fire. It's always a fun moment for me when we get off the bus and we say, what do we want to have for lunch today? And kids will tromp off into like the really sweet 1-acre garden that we have and grab some kale and grab some leeks and potatoes. We're still trudging out in the snow, harvesting the food that we eat, and that's actually just practical survival. If you're outdoors in the dead of Vermont winter, there's mutiny on your hands if you're not being fed, and so far I've survived 20 years without mutiny and would like to continue to do so. We'll start the day with a reading from Thoreau. Oftentimes those provide really rangy conversations. Sometimes it's 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes we've gone on for an hour or more. There are no bells that are interrupting the moments. If an exciting strand arises, we do that. Similarly speaking, if nature provides an opportunity and we're on our way down to the campsite and maybe we see some bobcat tracks and maybe a kill spot from an unlucky pheasant that got taken out, that might be the day's lesson and we go out tracking. Thoreau would call it huckleberrying. So we definitely look for the opportunity and the context that nature provides for us. One amazing experience that I had on the very first year, our final trip, we went up to Cooley Glen and we went to this beautiful camp spot that we go to, and at the spot, a tree had fallen on a moose. And the front part, this was late spring, the front part of the moose had been encased in ice, but the back end was clean and exposed, and coyotes had picked the body clean. And we had gotten there to the spring, the ice had just started to melt, and all the students were there, and we just said, we're going to have a funeral for the moose. And we picked up the log, and we dragged the moose carcass, and we buried the moose, and we offered burnt plants in the 4 directions. I'm not sure where that assignment would fit on a syllabus, but I would say that that's one of those experiences that for all of us, understanding the rich, fecund, aerobic earth, the nature of life and death, those cycles, that was something that was really, really profound. So again, I feel like the best teaching that I do is actually kind of getting out of the way and letting nature and letting opportunity take over. So I just sort of want to throw that out there. The curriculum itself, we intentionally have a heterogeneous mix of students. So we have kids who, are off to like Ivy League schools. We have kids who are just on the edge of dropping out. We have kids who are just everywhere in between. We want to reflect the microcosm of where we come from, Vergennes, Vermont. and I think we do a really good job of that. Students go on to, some go back to the high school, some go on to graduate school, some go out and enter the workplace. We've got an interesting catalog of experiences that Walden students have gone on to do, but I would say the through line for all of them is a real investment in education. I think they're not going through the motions of their learning. We ask it to be a rich experience for them. So again, to that end, have the curriculum really focused on writing, environmental studies, and the social sciences. The other half, it's open-ended. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure book. Like, what are you passionate about? How do we give you the opportunities? How do we give you the experiences to realize your dreams and aspirations? And so students have done everything from making a motorcycle to going. We had one student who was of Native American ancestry. She discovered her roots with the Cree people, and she made it a point to go up to Ujibugamu and find her tribe. And she skinned a beaver, and she was welcomed back into her tribe. That was her education. Again, not sure where it fits on the syllabus, but I'm pretty sure it clicks like all the boxes of opportunities that we should be providing for young people. You wind me up, I can kind of go on forever and ever about Walden. How am I doing with time? I've got a minute. So I actually, in the spirit of what, 2 minutes? All right, in the spirit of what I do, I'd actually would like to give one of my students the last word, and I'm putting him on the spot, but he's a gregarious sort, and I just feel like the importance and centrality of student voice, that's what we're about, and I kind of want to let my last word be the voice of a student.
I think the biggest takeaway that I've gotten from the Walden Project, and I think everyone else who's done it would say, is you don't learn that many facts. You know, we're not memorizing the parts of the cell. You know, we're not learning like the quadratic equation. What we're learning is how to think, you know, how to figure out what matters to you, you know, what like catches your eye, what drives you to work, to learn, and to focus in on that, to question, you know, authority. When they tell you to do something, ask them why. And I think that that is more important than anything I've gotten out of my conventional high school education, because that has given me the tools that I can go into whatever I want and be successful. Whether that's going for some higher academic pursuit, whether that's becoming a carpenter, whether that's becoming a farmer, it's giving you the tools to do what you want with your life. It's not about making sure that you can go into the workplace and perpetuate the capitalist system and be a good little minion for the government. It's about, you know, who you are, like what are you gonna do, and standing up for what you think is right.
Where were you, Matt, when I was at school? If only. And thank you for bringing up the moose. I think one of my most beautiful experiences of nature was meeting a moose on Route 100. Thank you very much for having me here. There's been so many wonderful talks and so many things that I want to talk about, connect to what's already been talked about, and particularly Dr. Krug talking about self-care, about caring. And the basis of the model that I want to talk about, which is the model for mind-body medicine, is self-care. So we have a medical model in this country, as you know, that is somewhat challenged. And a lot of it is around medication, and a lot of it is around surgery and so forth, all of which have their place. Thank you, Dr. Kiernan and Dr. Bouchard. The Western medicine is very important. Thanks to Dr. Kiernan, I dealt with a very painful kidney stone once. So I'm not speaking against Western medicine, but it's very imbalanced. And the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, which I'm lucky enough to be a faculty member of, is dedicated to helping others to get involved, as it were, in our own self-care and in healing. And that's about engagement. It's about so many of the principles that we've already talked about today, communion and community. So I want to show just a quick video of our work. The center does work all around the world, but the work that I want to just focus on for a moment is on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, which I was lucky enough to visit twice in 2016. And I'm just going to show you this little video about our work and then talk about the questions that Nadine asked us to answer and the principles of mind-body medicine. So I just invite everyone for a moment, just if you want to close your eyes. And just settle into your seat. And very gently, very comfortably beginning to follow the path of the breath. And in mind-body medicine, we call this soft belly meditation. So as you breathe in, you might want to breathe in the word soft. And as you breathe out the word belly. And as we do this, we activate the vagus nerve, and that invites our system to go from the sympathetic system to the parasympathetic system. And taking a deep breath. And letting it go. And when you're ready, opening your eyes. And gently, slowly coming back to the room. So much of what we work with in the Center for Mind-Body Medicine is trauma. Trauma is the Greek word for injury. And we work on the idea that all of us at some point have or will have experienced or are experienced or will experience trauma. And when we experience trauma, we go into fight or flight. And so much of what happens is that we end up in a state of chronic stress. I noticed the word stress came up a lot in previous talks. And mind-body medicine is really focused on how to help each individual in doing self-care to get in touch with ways that they can help move from a state of chronic stress, a state of trauma, to a state of calm, a state of being in the parasympathetic system. And we do this through different techniques. We do it through biofeedback, we do it through drawings, which draw on the unconscious, we do it through guided imagery, we do it through movement. Thank you, Sister Gail, for the shaking, the moving. We do shaking and we do chaotic breathing. And all of these techniques are designed to help us make these changes for ourselves. It's not about going and getting a pill. It's not about going and getting fixed. It's about really owning that we have the capacity within ourselves to heal ourselves, which is something that can very easily get forgotten. So Bill mentioned in class yesterday about the systemic trauma that's perpetuated on the land and the soil because of the ways that our society works right now. Our mind-body work looks intensely at all the places inside and outside the ecosystem of our minds and bodies where the effects of trauma are experienced and felt. And a lot of that's about the research into how our bodies obviously experience trauma, but also into the gut biome. And when we're talking about food, talking about how food affects us and how so many people now are suffering from leaky gut syndrome and irritable bowel syndrome and all these various ways in which processed foods and the chronic stress that people experience affects our entire ecosystem. Trauma comes in so many different ways. I was lucky enough to run a group last year for migrant workers working on farms in Vermont. Migrant workers who are away from home, who've normally experienced numerous traumas just getting to be in Vermont. And what was so powerful about that group was being with individuals who are dealing day to day with their incredibly challenging lives, 6 days work, 7 days work a week, and to come into community, because so many of the workers are isolated. They're on farms, they don't see each other. We had one man in our group who had not seen his children for 11 years. Imagine not seeing your children for 11 years. And the group is teaching techniques to help each person participating to be able to modulate their own experience. And on top of what happens when we experience trauma is when we have that trauma denied. I'm avoiding the impeachment hearings, but right now there are a number of people who are trying to gaslight an entire country that what we see in front of us is not what we see in front of us. And that's what happens with sexual assault, which is obviously something that comes up a lot in groups, is this experience of having what one has experienced be denied. So in trying to answer some of Nadine's questions that she gave us, I wanted just to talk about recovery. So recovery is the work that the Center for Mind-Body Medicine does, from chronic stress to hopefully a place of healthy homeostasis. Healing is the core of our work. This is through a combination of relaxation, awareness, and expression in community. I loved your idea, Mark, of the snakes being tangled, and the fact that, you know, the snakes can untangle, they can be free, they can free their bodies. We're really talking in mind-body medicine about how to free up the ways in which we get into different patterns. There's Thomas Berry, and then there's the Gospel of St. Thomas. And the Gospel of St. Thomas, Christ is supposed to have said, if you bring forth that which is within you, that which is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth that which is within you, that which is within you will destroy you. Regeneration is our work because we are sharing powerful, relatively simple and accessible techniques in a safe environment where this combination serves as a radical catalyst for hope. It is also our work because we insist on connection as our starting point, backed up by the biology of the tend and befriend principle, whereby such connection is organically and clinically and chemically healing. There's actually now a minister for loneliness in England. Loneliness has become such a problem that people think that the research seems to suggest that being lonely and being isolated has more impact on your system than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Recover places our work because we are lucky enough to go into communities whether it is in New Orleans, Gaza, the Pine Ridge Reservation, Kosovo, or Haiti, and work with those affected and co-create a local presence that takes over the work without us. Our first international work was in Kosovo, and mind-body medicine is now the model for the entire country's mental health system. I was lucky enough to work with 2 wonderful Kosovo psychiatrists in Parkland, Florida last year after the school shootings there. So I just want to end with a poem. It's my favorite poem, and it's by Hafiz. And it just reminds us that as we undertake this work, we do so with the awareness that the fireball, I think you said the fireball that's coming through us, is what's in charge, not us. It's called tripping over joy. What is the difference between your experience of living and that of a saint? Saint knows that the spiritual life is a sublime game of chess with God. And the beloved has just made such a fantastic move that the saint is tripping over joy, bursting out laughing and screaming, I surrender. Whereas you, my dear, you still think you have 1,000 serious moves. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. We had the pleasure of having Thomas with our class this past Wednesday, and he put us through a much longer meditation and exercise and shaking, and I think it was very, very, it was very good for all of us, so thank you. We're going to turn to Nancy Winship Milliken, who will share her art with us.
I work with materials of the farm. I work with elements of nature. Oh, sure. Yeah. I work with elements of nature. I work with wind and sun and rain. Okay, it didn't advance. There we go. I also work with scale and with the environment that we put the work into. Hold on one sec. Now, having said all of that, we also work with questions. We work with the creative arts offering a different way of knowing. So the questions are asked of each project, such as what if? So in this case, I asked, what if we brought the elements of the sheep back into the fold with them? So I do work on farms. I believe that they are our community centers. I think that's a place where we are nourished. I believe it's a place that the studio is nourished as well. So in this case, we needle felted wool that was sheared from the sheep and brought it back out into the field. And as you can see in the image right next to it, it disintegrated as well. And then the question is, what happens when you bring it out of the context of the field and bring it into the gallery, where it becomes larger, where nature is out of context, where it could be scary or it could be comforting. So a lot of projects are woven. This is a horsehair piece made out of cello bow hair. And if you think of a weaver not only as in weaving material, but also weaving communities together. So each project I asked of the curator, can we bring together a panel of high school students, environmental studies, farmers, lawyers, architects, and so that we can all weave together and communicate about what issues could be presented in the work. So every project also I build community. Interns from all over the nation come and we work with different artisans, such as poets, such as architects, earth builders. We work with farmers, of course. Just as a aside, Bread and Butter Farm is where I worked recently and still work there today. Here, Char Dignord, the recent poet laureate of Vermont, is talking to the interns on the bottom corner. And here we are all peers. We are all invested in the project. No one's really leading it. Certainly I hold and guide, but it is all of the ideas are coming in from everyone. So to go to the questions. So this is the charred beams of Shelburne Farms barn burn that happened recently in 2015. It's tragic. It is like as if a community member had passed. And to honor this, we gathered some of the beams, and if you think of art as transforming material, we couldn't figure out what to do. This is material already transformed. It's beautiful. It's magnificent. And so I collaborated with Char Dignord, and we stared at the material and asked the question, what can this beam say? Can it represent other beams? Can we give it voice? So we brought it out and we dragged it through the fields, laying down canvas onto the field, and all of a sudden, mark making started to happen. And so this is an imprint of the field and barn talking together in my mind. This is a language that I don't know. This is a language and mark making that is not of my own agenda, but a what if. What if we drag the beam across canvas? What if we put the canvas out onto the field and have the field bump and lump itself into mark making? Then we bring it out of the context of the field and put it in a gallery. And there's Char. So Char Dignord also wrote a poem regarding the charred remains and the actions of the interns. Here's the mark making that just blew me away. So this is for Sister Gail. This is a print made of earth from Bread and Butter Farm. We buried canvas into the earth. So the question here that we asked is, can we print earth? Can we have earth imprint itself without our doing, without our pressure? And this piece now, earth print, is called Galaxy. I enjoyed seeing the air and the pockets that came through in the variety of marks that the earth made. This is also to start talking about soil. So this is an example of where I shine the light of the studio is on what I want, what I believe is towards the good. And so I could talk about agriculture as in all the things that we do wrong, but why give that time? And I want to shine the light on that's good. That is possible. That can be regenerative. So this is called morning routine. This is oxen walking onto canvas. And I wanted to take a look at the man and animal relationship. And farm is a wonderful place to do that. You know, I could make work out in the wild, but there's a little disconnect right now that I would love, obviously, that we all come together and are not as disconnected. But at the farm, this is where we can practice that connection. So I'm going to give you a little quote right now. So I'm combining here Bruno Latour and regenerative farmers. And he asks, how can we be capable of attaching oneself to the soil on one hand and becoming attached to the world on the other? And this is a fundamental question of art. I believe in an art practice is that we create work out of what we know, maybe the internal, maybe something right under our feet, the soil. It's a lot of this work is site-specific, and meaning that it is about the area right around where the work is being made. And how can we also make it universal? How can we also take something that's so personal but yet make it universal? I think of these earth prints as landscape paintings. This is at Bread and Butter Farm. I've had the good fortune of working with them. And here now we're also working with the animals. And this is intensive rotational grazing, which is a practice that Bread and Butter Farm practices, moving their animals through the field quickly and in mob formation. Working with the farmer, Brendan Bless, we integrated the canvases in with the cows, and I created a printing press that could handle the weight of the herd of cows. And here's the printmaking, not of my own, but of the cows, creating situations that can happen. And here's the full print, 30 some odd feet. Now, out of that, and working with the farm, I started to hear some other ways of expression. And there's a human-animal connection, communication that happens out in the field when you're moving the cows through the field that quickly. So I created another sensory, an auditory. That's Brandon Bless calling. That's Lauren Greco calling. And the cows responding. The question asked here, what if I threw my phone down in the ground, and what can it capture? I'm not going to play the whole thing through, but I just wanted to give you an example of the interspecies communication that I witnessed. A Vermont choreography. This is the most recent project I've been working on. This is called, this is in process, Earth Press process. It's site-specific, and what that means is that I am doing some deep listening. I'm asking, what would you like to tell me about yourself? Of place, of history, of geological history, cultural history, of the people who are living there now, of the animals. What would you like to tell me? And for this project, we changed the process of asking ourselves this question, but asking of the public, what change would you like to witness on this earth? And we gathered answers, one-word answers, and imprinted them into Adobe Earth blocks. And here I'll just show you the rest as we move through. These are the letters that we used to imprint. So as the words came in, we were doing deep listening to the responses. We held each letter that made up the word, we imprinted it and embedded them, and created a sculpture on Minuteman National Historical Park, which I forgot to tell you is where this piece is located. That's why the witnessing of change, which is where the Revolutionary War happened, what can we witness today? And words such as compassion, on a place that commemorizes a war, peace was the most submitted word out of 5,000 or so entries. What happens when you just let the words go, let the work go, let it be absorbed back into the earth? Are we allowing the America to work, or is to speak, or is the earth actually speaking? Excuse me. Out of that came questions of what do you pledge to this earth for another installation? And then deep listening, working again with Chard de Niord, we took images of animals responding to the work. So we brought it from human into animal to check out different ways of exploring. So in other words, the work is never done in just one iteration. And I want to end with courage. Courage to live the questions. Courage to live in the world of not knowing. Most of these projects, we do not know how they're going to turn out. To practice what if. To listen. Courage to challenge the assumptions of oneself and open every day as an apprentice. Thank you.
So this is still on. So we're now at a place where we can take our break. And in time, linear time and form, we'd love everyone to come back at 11:30. And at that point, we are going to, so stretch your legs, have a bio break, whatever you need. And when we come back, you can sit in where you're seated now within a sphere you sat down in. You could change spheres. What we're going to do at that point, we're going to have 2 sessions, 20 minutes each. They're going to be facilitated by 5 of our students, both current and former students, in terms of the perennial turn. And each of those, there's going to be index cards, as you saw on the table. So come back, have a seat, and we're going to then get into a conversation where we're going to capture using a couple questions. The first one in the round 1 will be, what are the roles of this sphere in nourishing change? So maybe think about that while you're milling about, or not. Empty yourself and then come back fresh, literally and figuratively. So yeah, have a good break, and then come back, and we'll ring a bell to get us all started.
So we're going to slowly wind this down, give you a chance to get back to your lives. I just have a couple of words before you head off. Yeah. So on behalf of Mark and Nadine and our students, thank you all for making the time today to come together and share your ideas, your curiosity, your courage. I just want a couple of thank yous. This kind of day takes a lot of effort, and Nadine deserves a special round of gratitude and applause. Her work is amazing. As she says, she thinks she knows just about everybody in here. I think she knows just about everybody in Vermont, which is why she's been great in helping this project connect with the likes of all of you. So thank you. Thank you to our students who have very busy lives and a lot to do. Thank you for scribing and for being with us. So students, can you stand up, the scribes? All the students from the class. So what happens next, right? We get into our cars, we listen to the impeachment trial, we go to the bank, we pick up our dry cleaning, we live, we go on and keep living. So that's what we do. What we hope to do with what happened here today is to get this information in a presentable form so that you all can access it at some point. And to the extent that you want to stay involved, there are those sign-up sheets on the table. We have a website that we are slowly building, and by slowly building, I mean we don't have the foundation dug yet, or even probably the architectural drawings, but it is on this sheet, and keep an eye on that, and we will be posting materials as we get that site up and running. The other thing we're going to do is take what we learned this morning and our community partners that now number 21 community partners from last fall and this fall, and some students and the faculty are going to meet this afternoon to take what you gave us today and think about how we can connect, stay connected, and to grow this work. So what you've done today has been very valuable to all of us, so thank you for that. We heard so many powerful words, emotions, images today, so thank you for all of that. And the sort of two words for me that stuck out the most were the word sphere and the word threshold, thanks to Aubrey. When we think of a sphere, we can think of something as small as a cell or a water droplet, or something as large as the Earth, and maybe the universe itself. And one of the aspects of a sphere is that it's a whole in itself, and yet it needs others. That is, anything that's a living sphere, like a cell, has to have a membrane that goes in and out, right? It has to take things in and let things out. And so all of our spheres have to work together. So the good news about being a sphere is that you're never alone. You can't be alone. You have to be constantly in motion, giving and taking. And it recognizes that we can't do it alone. So it's good to be here. It's good to be together, to struggle together, and to make this work happen. The threshold too it's hard to cross it, and all of you in this room have made decisions to be here, to engage in action, and yet we're all frustrated that things aren't going as fast as they should, or change is too slow. But that's not how the universe works. Change is constant, and our activity must be constant. We can't just do it once. So let's keep at it. Let's keep moving and keep growing, both up and down. So thanks again. Oh yes, on your way out, we have a banner of the Land Institute roots. The little one, the little short one, is wheat. And of course, wheat is a great creator of both our bounty and the troubles that we've had in agriculture, not just wheat. But alongside of it is Kernza, the intermediate wheatgrass that the Land Institute has developed. That's a real size photograph, so the roots go down about 11 feet. That plant you see is 14 months old, so it's still a baby. So take a look, enjoy, be inspired. We hope to see all of you again. So anything else, Nadine, that I've missed? Okay. One quick announcement, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Hoyler. I was a community partner in this class, and among other things, I've joined the Extinction Rebellion to fight for climate justice. So we are going to be doing a public presentation on December 3rd at 6 p.m. at the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Church, just around the corner. Please join us to hear more about the science and what you can do. Resilience, resistance and resilience. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, folks. Give yourself a hand. It's been great. We'll see you again next time, I hope.